"Can I stay here tonight?" she said, standing in the doorway of my hotel room at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night in Stowe, Vermont. I can't waste money on 2 rooms when there's only one left, and it makes no sense for either of us to drive an hour in the dark. Her name was Nora Whitfield. She was my boss. She was the woman who ran our entire department with a voice that could silence a boardroom and a smile that made you forget she'd just dismantled your entire quarterly report. She was brilliant, composed, untouchable, and she was asking to stay here tonight, in my room, with me. But here's what you need to understand. I wasn't the kind of man women like Nora Whitfield noticed. I was Ethan Calloway, 34 years old, senior project coordinator, the guy who managed timelines and spreadsheets while people like her shaped visions. I kept my head down. I did my job. I went home alone to a quiet apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina, where the only voice I heard most nights was the television I left on so the silence wouldn't remind me of everything I'd lost. But she was standing there with her overnight bag slung over one shoulder, rain dotting her coat from the October storm rolling through the mountains. And she wasn't asking permission. She was telling me what made sense. 2 rooms were a waste of money. 1 room was practical. She said it like it was simple math. But it wasn't simple. Not when I'd spent 2 years pretending I didn't notice the way her perfume lingered in the conference room after she left. Not when I'd trained myself to look away every time her eyes held mine a second longer than they should have across the Monday morning table. Not when the woman I'd quietly, carefully, silently built a wall against was now walking past me into a room with 1 king bed and a couch barely big enough for a child. She set her bag down, looked around, looked at me and said, "Relax, Calloway. It's just 1 night." But was it? Was it really just 1 night? What happens when a man who swore he'd never open up again gets locked in a room with the one woman who makes him forget why he closed down in the first place? What happens when the lights go out, the storm rolls in, and 2 people who've been hiding behind titles and professionalism suddenly have nowhere left to hide? And what was Nora Whitfield really running from? Because a woman that composed, that controlled, that determined not to waste money on 2 rooms. She wasn't just being practical. She was making a choice. The question was, did I have the courage to understand what that choice really meant? Let me back up. Because 6 hours earlier, I was safe. Comfortable inside the walls I'd spent 14 months building after Claire walked out of my life and said the truest thing anyone had ever told me. Loving you, Ethan, is like knocking on a door that nobody ever opens. She wasn't wrong. I was the kind of man who showed up for everything except the things that mattered most. I'd hold the door for a stranger, stay late to fix someone else's report, carry a coworker's boxes on moving day. But the moment someone tried to get close, really close, the kind of close where you have to hand somebody the soft parts of yourself and trust them not to squeeze, I disappeared. Not physically. I was always standing right there. But emotionally, I might as well have been on another continent. After Claire left, I threw myself into work at Lark and Caldwell, our branding firm in Charlotte. Extra projects, late nights, early mornings, reliability became my hiding place. If I was busy enough, I didn't have to feel anything. And then Nora Whitfield transferred in from the Chicago office. She walked into the Monday meeting like she'd been running the place for years. Charcoal blazer, no notes, no hesitation. "I'm Nora. I don't do long meetings, I don't do vague timelines, and I don't do excuses. But I do listen, and I'm fair. We're going to do great work. Together." The room erupted in applause. I didn't clap. I just watched her. Something in the way she carried herself made the air in the room feel different, like someone had opened a window I didn't know was closed. Over 2 years, we built a rhythm. She trusted my coordination. I respected her vision. She'd send a 1-line email, timeline on Haverford, and I'd have the full breakdown on her desk within the hour. She'd nod, say, "Good," and that single word meant more than applause from anyone else. But I never told her that. I noticed things I had no business cataloging. The pen she tucked behind her ear when she was thinking. The 2 coffees she brought to client meetings, one for herself, one for whoever seemed like they were having the hardest day. The real laugh that escaped when something genuinely surprised her, a sound that started in her chest and lit up her whole face. Every time I heard it, something in my ribcage shifted like furniture being rearranged in a room I thought was locked, but I never said a word. She was my boss. I didn't trust myself to be what anyone needed, and the last time I let someone in, she left. So when the company announced a leadership retreat in Stowe, Vermont, I told myself it was just work. I packed my bag and flew north with 6 coworkers, including Owen Prescott, the account manager who smiled at Nora like he was running for office, and she was every voter in the room. He was tall, charming, the kind of guy who touched your shoulder when he talked and remembered your dog's name. He made me feel invisible, and I was fine with that. Invisible was safe. The Whitmore Inn was beautiful. Stone walls draped in crimson ivy, a fireplace the size of a small car, the smell of cinnamon and cedar. But Stowe's Harvest Festival had booked every room in town, and the inn was 1 room short for our group. "I'm so sorry," the woman at the front desk said. "We only have 5 rooms. The festival overlapped your reservation." The team shuffled awkwardly. Owen volunteered to share, his eyes drifting toward Nora. And then Nora spoke. "Calloway and I will share. It makes the most sense. I'm not going to waste money on some overpriced emergency booking when there's a perfectly good room right here. It's practical." Owen's smile stiffened. My heart did something I hadn't given it permission to do, and I said the only thing I could. "Yeah, sure, makes sense." It did not make sense. Room 14 had hardwood floors, exposed beams, a window facing the mountains going dark against the twilight, a reading chair in the corner, and 1 king-sized bed, white duvet, centered on the wall like it was daring us to acknowledge it. "I'll take the chair," I said. She looked at it, looked at me. I'm 6'1". The chair was 5 feet long on a generous day. "Ethan, that's not a couch. That's a large pillow with armrests." "It's fine. When have you ever slept on something that small, during a hostage situation?" I almost laughed, but I was too busy keeping my face neutral while standing 5 feet from a bed I was sharing a room with, opposite a woman who smelled like vanilla and rain and something that made the locked room in my chest rattle. We argued. She wanted the chair. I insisted. 2 stubborn people in a too small room with a too big bed. Finally, she relented. "Fine. But when you can't move your neck tomorrow, that's on you." She disappeared into the bathroom. I exhaled for the first time in an hour. When she came out, her hair was down. At work, it was always pulled back, controlled. But now it fell past her shoulders, and she looked so different from the woman who commanded conference rooms that my brain stopped for a full second. "Stop staring," she said, but she was smiling. A small, quiet smile I'd never seen at the office. I wasn't staring. "You were definitely staring." The lamp clicked off. I lay on that ridiculous chair, legs hanging over the armrest, lower back already, protesting, listening to the storm and her breathing across the room. Then the power went out. Total darkness, total silence except the storm. The heating clicked off and the cold started creeping through the old windows. "Well," Nora's voice came from the dark, "that's not ideal." I found matches and candles the inn had left on the nightstand. The flame hissed to life, and warm orange light bloomed across the room, softening every edge. The space that had felt manageable 5 minutes ago suddenly felt intimate, close, like the walls had moved inward. "You know what this room needs?" she said. "Electricity?" She almost laughed. "Cider. There's a kit on the desk." I found it, 2 packets of spiced apple cider mix and 2 ceramic mugs with painted leaves. The bathroom tap still ran warm enough. I stirred the mix in, the smell of cinnamon and apple cutting through the cold air like a memory of something I couldn't place. I handed her a mug, our fingers brushed. Neither of us mentioned it, but I felt it in my wrists, my chest, the base of my throat. She took a sip, closed her eyes, and made a sound so quietly content it nearly undid me. "Okay," she said, "this is actually perfect." I sat on the edge of the bed, not beside her, not far away, just close enough that the candlelight covered us both. And for the first time in 14 months, silence between 2 people didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like the beginning of something I wasn't ready to name. She spoke first. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone at work?" In the candlelight, her expression was stripped of every layer of authority I'd seen her wear for 2 years. She wasn't the department director. She was just Nora, holding a warm mug with both hands, staring at the flame. 2 years ago, I was engaged. His name was David. Financial analyst, smart, kind, the kind of man your parents approve of before he finishes introducing himself. 4 years together, venue booked, dress fitted, invitations printed. She paused. The rain filled the gap. He called it off, sat me down one Sunday morning over coffee and said, "Nora, I love you, but you don't know how to let someone be your partner. Everything is a project to you, even us." Her voice didn't crack, but something in it thinned, like a wire pulled too tight. The worst part wasn't losing him. The worst part was knowing he was right. I ran our relationship the same way I ran my department. Timelines, milestones, deliverables. I didn't even realize it until he was walking out the door with a suitcase and the ring still sitting on the kitchen counter. She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw something I recognized because I saw it in my own mirror every morning. Fear. Not of the storm, but of being exactly the person someone told you that you were. I transferred to Charlotte because I needed to start over somewhere nobody knew, somewhere I could just be the boss. It was easier than being the woman who got left. I should have said something safe, something professional. That's what the old Ethan would have done. But the candlelight and the storm and the way she'd just handed me something breakable made me do something I hadn't done in 14 months. I opened the door. "Claire," I said quietly, "my ex, 4 years together too." And the last thing she said to me was, "Loving you is like knocking on a door that nobody ever opens." Nora didn't flinch, didn't offer platitudes. She just listened with her whole self. She was right. I don't let people in, not really. I show up, I help out, I do the work. But the moment someone asks for the real thing, the messy, vulnerable, unmanaged version of me, I shut down. And I've spent 14 months telling myself that's fine, that being alone is safer than being known. The rain softened, as if even the storm was listening. "But it's not fine," I said. "It's just empty." She set her mug down slowly, and then she said something that cracked the foundation of every wall I'd ever built. "You opened the door tonight, Ethan. When I asked to stay here, you didn't hesitate. You let me in. Into your space, into your night. And now you're telling me something real, something that costs you something to say. That doesn't sound like a man who keeps the door closed. That sounds like a man who's been waiting for someone to knock the right way." The room went so quiet, I could hear the candle wax dripping. The storm had pulled back, the thunder retreating over the mountains, two broken people recognizing each other in the dark. She fell asleep mid-sentence. She'd been talking about her grandmother, picking apples in upstate New York every October, how the smell of cider always took her back to that orchard. Her voice softened, slowed, trailed into a murmur, and then she was gone. Her head tilted against the pillow, her hands still loosely wrapped around the mug I gently lifted from her fingers. I sat in the candlelight watching her breathe. No title, no authority, no armor, just Nora. And something unlocking in my chest that I knew, with absolute certainty, I could never put back. The candle burned to a stub. The storm whispered its last against the window. I pulled the blanket tighter on that ridiculous chair, my back aching, my heart wide open, and thought, so this is what it feels like when the door finally swings. Morning light poured through the curtain and the room smelled like cinnamon, and something changed. I woke with my neck locked sideways and my spine screaming from that chair. But the first thing I saw was Nora still asleep, her hair fanned across the pillow, and the pain didn't matter. None of it mattered. She stirred, opened her eyes, saw me already awake, and smiled before she was fully conscious, the kind of smile people give before they remember to guard themselves. That smile broke something open in me that I spent the entire day pretending it didn't. Breakfast downstairs was warm and loud. The team gathered around a long wooden table. Scrambled eggs, fresh bread, Vermont maple syrup on everything. Nora sat across from me, back in director mode, hair pulled up, posture straight, laughing at Miranda's story about a client disaster. She was Whitfield again. and I was Calloway. And last night felt like a dream I wasn't allowed to reference. Then Owen opened his mouth. "So," he said, grinning over his coffee, loud enough for the table. "How was the sleepover, you two? Calloway, you survived sharing a room with the boss?" Laughter rippled around the table. Light, harmless, but I watched Nora's jaw tighten for half a second before she smiled and said, "He snores. I survived worse." More laughter. The moment passed, but something between us didn't pass. It froze. For the rest of the morning sessions, she didn't look at me once, not during the strategy workshop, not during the team-building exercise where we were literally standing 3 feet apart. She was professional, engaged, present with everyone except me, and I did what I always do when something scares me. I disappeared, not physically. I was right there. But I pulled back behind the walls, convinced I'd misread everything, the candlelight, the confessions, the way she'd said, "You opened the door." Maybe it was just the storm talking. Maybe in daylight she regretted it. Maybe I was just the convenient audience. For a vulnerable moment, she wished she could take back. By evening, the distance between us felt wider than the mountains outside. After group dinner, I slipped out to the inn's back porch. The air was cold and sharp, the sky clear for the first time since we'd arrived, stars scattered above the dark ridgeline like someone had flung salt across black velvet. I sat on the wooden bench, hands in my jacket pockets, breathing clouds into the silence, telling myself this was fine. This was normal. This was safer. Then the door opened behind me. Footsteps, and she sat down beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. The cold pressed in. Somewhere in the valley, a church bell rang once. "You disappeared today," she said quietly. I stared at the mountains. "Just giving you space." I didn't ask for space. Owen's comment, I figured you were embarrassed about last night, about what we said. She turned to look at me, full on. No director mask, no conference room armor, just Nora, breath visible in the cold air, eyes steady and unafraid. "I don't care what Owen thinks," she said. "I don't care what anyone at that table thinks. What I care about is that last night, for the first time in 2 years, I told someone the truth about myself, and he actually heard me. And then today, he vanished. Do you know how that felt?" The words hit me like cold water, because I recognized exactly what I'd done. Claire's voice echoed. The door nobody opens. I'd done it again. Someone knocked, and I retreated. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it in a way I'd never meant those 2 words before. Not politely, not professionally, but from the place where the walls were supposed to be and weren't anymore. She held my gaze. The stars shifted above us. The cold didn't matter. "Don't disappear on me, Ethan," she said softly. "Not after last night." "I won't." We sat there on that porch until our fingers went numb and our breath made clouds that tangled together in the dark. Our shoulders touched. Neither of us moved away. And when we finally went back inside, back to room 14, back to the one bed and the ridiculous chair, something was different. The professional scaffolding was gone. The excuses were gone. She looked at the chair, looked at me, and shook her head. "You're not sleeping on that thing again. We're adults. The bed is big enough." I didn't argue. We lay on opposite sides, a respectful distance apart, the duvet between us like a soft border. But in the dark, her hand found the space between us, not reaching, just resting there, open. I put mine next to hers, not touching, just close enough that I could feel the warmth. And that was enough. For now, that was everything. The last morning in Stowe, I woke before she did. The room was quiet, the storm long gone, golden light pressing through the curtain like the world was trying to show me something. Nora was asleep on her side, one hand still resting in the space between us, exactly where she'd left it the night before. I didn't move. I just watched her breathe and thought, so this is what it feels like to not be alone. I got up carefully, found the last 2 cider packets on the desk, and made them with warm water from the bathroom tap. The smell of cinnamon filled the room. When she stirred, she smiled before opening her eyes. The same unguarded smile from the morning before. The one she gave before remembering to be the boss. "You made cider," she murmured. "Last 2 packets. Then we better make them count." We drove back to Charlotte separately. At the office Monday, everything was professional again. Meetings, timelines, emails. She was Whitfield. I was Calloway. But underneath, everything had shifted. Eye contact across conference tables that lasted 1 beat too long. A message from her at 9 p.m. Good work on the Haverford deck, that I read 4 times because I knew it, meant something else entirely. Weeks passed. The distance became its own kind of ache. Not painful exactly, but present, like pressing a bruise you don't want to heal because it reminds you the feeling was real. Then, one Friday evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it and there was Nora standing on my doorstep in Charlotte, holding a paper bag. She pulled out 2 boxes of apple cider packets and said, "I figured we could use these before they expire." It was an excuse, and we both knew it. She sat on my kitchen counter while I heated the water. We talked for hours about nothing and everything, her grandmother's orchard, my first building design, the things we were afraid of, the things we weren't anymore. And when the conversation finally faded into comfortable silence, I said something I'd been holding since that night in Stowe. "For what it's worth, you opened the door." She looked at me, confused. I explained what Claire said. "The door nobody opens. You knocked the right way, Nora, and I heard you. For the first time, I actually heard someone." She set down her mug, took my hand, and kissed me. Soft, unhurried, like we had all the time in the world. And in that small kitchen, with cinnamon in the air and her hands in mine, 14 months of silence finally broke into something that sounded like the beginning of the rest of my life. 1 year later, we went back to Stowe, same inn, same room, room 14. As she climbed into bed, she looked at me with that smile, my favorite smile, the unguarded one, and said, "Can I stay here tonight?" I grinned. "I don't know, that chair's pretty comfortable." She threw a pillow at my head, and I caught it laughing, pulling her close, knowing the truth that changed everything. The biggest moments in life don't announce themselves. They show up disguised as booking errors and rainstorms and 2 packets of apple cider in a dark room. And if you're brave enough to open the door when someone knocks, everything changes. Everything. If this story touched your heart, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. We pour our hearts into every single video, and having you here means the world. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next one.